How's it going, folks? Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. Now, every time the United States gets involved in a war, whether it be directly or indirectly, the establishment, the people running the government, the Pentagon, the CIA, they need the media to pump out tons of propaganda while at the same time preventing people from speaking the truth. And we can go back to Vietnam famously, where we had a president in JFK who wanted to withdraw from Vietnam. Of course, he was shot, perhaps by the CIA. And when Lyndon Johnson came into office, he cranked everything back up and recommitted U.S. forces to Vietnam. The Iraq War, of course, weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. And now we have this war in Ukraine. And the script has not changed. They produce tons of propaganda. And if anybody speaks out against the war, you are labeled perhaps a traitor, a Putin apologist. And I think ultimately that was why Tucker Carlson was kicked off of Fox News. It was him questioning the war in Ukraine and the U.S. support for this war in Ukraine. Now, I want to go through then and talk about some of this propaganda, because in order for enough of the public to want to support this war, there has to be this belief that Ukraine can win. And in order for people to believe that, again, we need to pump out this propaganda to keep us still in the game. If the 100% truth ever came out, I think people will be like, oh my God, I can't believe I supported this. And in the future, it might. And just like Vietnam, we might learn 20 or 30 years from now the exact truth, and we might go, wow, I can't believe we fell for it. So we should know, based on the past, on history, that this is likely to happen. But since I don't want to wait 20 years, I want to go through and debunk and just point out some of the glaring pieces of propaganda that our media is pushing out there. And these are mainstream media outlets. This is not some person on YouTube or Twitter just spewing out garbage. These are big papers, big publications that are considered credible mainstream. Now, does Russia also put out propaganda? Let me just say that. Yes, they do. I'm not Russian. I'm American. And we're supposed to be, if you listen to our ruling class, so much better than Russia. It's Russia that does propaganda, not the United States. So, yes, Russia does propaganda, but the problem is we claim that we do not, when clearly we do. So let me start first with this story that was actually in the Daily Mail. And this is a story that created the meme of Russians firing shovels. And according to the Daily Mail, from a report they got from somebody, 500 Russian conscripts were given just 3 shovels to dig trenches, and they were all killed by a Ukrainian attack. 500 conscripts, 3 shovels, and they were all wiped out. Now, why would the Daily Mail put this out there? It's so preposterous. Even if it was half that number, or a quarter of that number, the idea, 500 conscripts, 3 shovels, and all just slaughtered by the Ukrainians. And this is put out there, and people actually read it. And if you're the Daily Mail, you're the editor, aren't you embarrassed? Apparently not. And these are the things that over the last year and a half, the press has been doing, these kind of ridiculous stories. And one thing I've noticed, if you read these articles, because people often focus on the headline, read the article. And you'll read through there and see, oh, the only source of information was the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the organization that has the biggest incentive to make things up in order to keep up support for the war. Yet all the outlets in the West, in the United States and England, they will repeat what the Ministry of Defense in Ukraine says without actually criticizing it or asking themselves, does this make any sense? And of course, if he did that, you go, no, it does not. Now, when this war started, one of the things that we pointed out from the West was that Russia could not maintain their attacks on Ukraine, that they would run out of munitions. We heard this back in March of 2022, that Russia was going to run out of missiles, run out of ammunition, and that would stop their war effort. So we can go back all the way to March to see this. And that's in the summertime, what happened? The war continued. And once again, in November 2022, over 6 months ago, we get articles. CBS News, a credible outlet, with munitions running out, Russia hurls Iranian drones and anti-aircraft missiles at Ukrainian cities. So they're running out back in October 2022. We have Yahoo, Russia running out of Iskander and Caliber missiles. This is August 2022. New York Times, here's what Russia's attack may indicate about its weapons stockpile. Then we have Reuters. Again, this was back in March of 2022. Russia running out of precision munitions in Ukraine war. And then finally this year, January 2023, Newsweek, Russia may run out of missiles in 3 months, intelligence report says. Now that is, of course, 4 months ago, and Russia just recently had one of their biggest attacks. So for over a year straight, we have prominent Western media outlets reporting that Russia was running out of missiles, and that would stop their effort to execute this war. It's been 15 months, 16 months now, and they're still launching missiles. Has anybody in the West ever said, man, we really got this wrong? Has anybody reading these stories go, wait a second, you guys said a year ago they're going to run out of missiles? And they didn't. So what does it say about the Western press? And who is the one out there actually producing propaganda? Is it just the Russians? No, it's clearly, obviously, people in the West, Western media outlets, and Western intelligence. Now, so we have that aspect of the war, the issue of whether or not Russia would run out of munitions. And of course, Ukraine has been struggling with ammunition, and we have a very apparently limited capacity to make more ammunition. And Russia, it seems, is able by itself to outproduce the United States and Western Europe. So in a war, one component of your ability to fight clearly is the ability to create munitions, and Russia can do that better than the West. Now, what else do you need in war besides weapons? You need people. And we've been getting all of these crazy numbers about Russian casualties. Now, when the war first started, it was reported by the West that there were 190,000 Russian troops entering Ukraine back in February of 2022. And then we had in September the partial mobilization of 300,000 soldiers. And we saw the video at the time of some disgruntled Russians being sent back to the military, and some people fled. But eventually it calmed down. And since then, we haven't seen really any video from Russia of people being forced to join the military or any complaining. So 300,000 troops in the partial mobilization, plus the 190 back during the initial invasion. And of course, there was militia, Wagner, Chechen, DPR, LPR. So we have around, 500,000 troops plus. Now, if the casualties were as bad as the West is claiming, and Milley said back in November that both sides had suffered over 100,000 casualties, dead and wounded. And then in January, we get an article saying that, actually not January, recently we have an article saying that since December, Russia has had 100,000 dead and wounded. How could Russia field an army right now that we know is over 500,000 men if there's 200,000 plus dead and wounded? they would be running out of people. They will be the ones issuing another mobilization. And that was actually the claim from Ukrainian intelligence back in December. They said that in January of 2023, the Russians would mobilize another 500,000 people. Did that happen? No, it did not. So clearly, what we're seeing from Russia and what we're seeing from these alleged casualty reports doesn't make sense. And again, part of the support for the war is the belief that the Russians are getting decimated by the Ukrainians, and if we just keep it up, and not take our foot off that gas pedal, Ukraine can win. So Russia's getting decimated, Ukraine's fighting great, and we just got to hold it out. But I want to show you something now that's kind of depressing. I'm going to put on the screen right now. Mobilization in Ukraine. I guarantee you have not seen these videos. These are people in Ukraine, young men, some of them not actually very young, some of them middle-aged, being collected up by these enforcers, by these soldiers, and forced to mobilize. Now, these are, I've found dozens of these clips, and there's way more. These are just the ones I collected in a few minutes of people being pulled off the street and mobilized. I could play this all day long. And my question to you is, A, have you seen the Western media ever show you these mobilizations? And B, if Ukraine is not the one suffering all the losses, why are they the ones grabbing guys off the street and not Russia? Why aren't we seeing these videos coming from Russia? And the truth may be, in my belief, is that it's Ukraine that is suffering the bulk of the casualties, not the Russians. And they're running out of manpower, and they're going around and grabbing whoever they can. That's what's happening there. And that is very sad. And the last thing, too, is this idea about morale. All we hear is that the Russians don't want to fight, that they all want to surrender if they can to the Ukrainians, and they're desperate to go home. And they're fighting this war because Putin is crazy and making them do it. But again, we're not seeing these vans show up and drag away Russians to be sent to Ukraine. This is happening in Ukraine to Ukrainians who are being rounded up and sent to the front. So the morale issue, is it just on the Russian side, or is there also an issue on the Ukrainian side? And clearly, they're suffering with manpower, and since they can't get enough people to join the military and go fight, they have to find these people, chase them down, tackle them, and throw them into those vans to be taken somewhere, trained for a few weeks before being sent to Bakhmut and be where they will probably be slaughtered. So again, the Western press does not want to show you this, and you might feel sorry for the Ukrainians and go, wait a second, maybe there should be a ceasefire, some sort of negotiation, because we are just watching the Ukrainians get massacred. But again, the West doesn't want you to know that. The Western media doesn't show you these things, and this is how they keep up support for the war effort. You walk into any store, bar, restaurant, and you ask anybody in there about this war, and everything I just said to you will be completely foreign to them in the United States. And that's what's so sad, is that this is happening, and most Americans simply do not have the information. No matter how much, how aware you think people are that they're being lied to, and after Russiagate and Trump stuff, you think it would be apparent, but it's not. People still, at some level, trust the mainstream media. And maybe, I think this is also a factor, I think people don't want to recognize the extent to which the U.S. government is corrupt. Because if they acknowledge that, it would shake their entire foundation, and they would have to rethink everything. So I think for a lot of people, it's easier just to put your head down, not challenge things. You live in America, you got a decent job, you got a family and kids. Well, you don't want to be a martyr and take things on. You just want to feed your family, go on vacation once a year, and live a relatively peaceful life. And if that means you got to just ignore some of the things that sort of glare out at you from the press that's nonsense, so be it. So I do think there's a percentage of Americans who simply don't want to be bothered with confronting the level of deception that comes from our government and our media, and that's sadly the case. Well, I hope this video gave you some information that, again, you wouldn't see coming from MSNBC or Fox News for that matter. And I hope that it gives you a better idea of what's going on and makes you question everything coming out of Ukraine. And again, not just the Ukrainian side, the Russians too have propaganda. But again, I'm not a Russian, I'm an American. And the only government I have a direct influence on, allegedly through voting, is the American government. They're the ones that have an obligation to uphold the First Amendment and to, be servants to the people, which of course is a joke to even say that out loud, because we clearly, they are not servants. We are the servants or the slaves that do their bidding, and they will lie to us, manipulate us to do exactly what they want. Well, that's it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.